everybody. Welcome to InPsightRadio. I am your host, Danielle Egnew, and every week, as always, you are a fly on the wall to everywhere. How is everybody? I am hoping you're doing very well. This has been such an odd time in history. We're coming up onto the end of summer, and I do apologize for my kind of weird, raspy voice right now. We have incredible fires in Montana, in addition to the jet stream bringing up, of course, all those horrible fires in California. We're receiving a lot of that smoke up in these neck of the woods. So my hometown of Billings has been, really inundated by smoke. And the other day we went to leave the house and it looked like there was fog. I mean, you could barely see across the street. The air quality was so poor. And that was in part due to the fact that eastern Montana and those big giant rolling plains out there have been on fire. And a town not so far from my hometown, maybe 50 miles or so, was being evacuated because these massive flames were coming up over. I mean, it was incredible. They were coming up over the bend there. So again, I apologize for sounding a little wheezy. We kind of had to shut things down here for a little while until we could get the air quality back and it was safe for folks to come out of the house. But here we are. So hi. And I hope you're all doing so well. And man, we've got a lot to cover, so I'm going to jump right in here. I'm going to give us a little break from all of our world transition today because I think we could all use a little bit of that as we start to come out of summertime and into autumn. And one of the things I wanted to look into, the thing really, but lots of different subcategories here, is aliens. Because when it gets too weird on the planet Earth, just look to the sky, people. Look to the sky. That, and I've had a lot of you asking if I could do a podcast on alien life, extraterrestrials. So this is going to be one of many coming up. And I'm kind of spacing them out so it doesn't turn into one of the later seasons of the X-Files, where after a while you were really counting on Scully and Mulder to bring you some weird, bizarre phenomenon every weekend. Pretty much after a while, it was just episode after episode after episode of alien conspiracy in the government. And that started to get a little sad and weird and old. So I'm going to space these out. But today we're going to start with what alien species the United States government has been talking with and hanging out with. And it happens to be an alien species that I do quite a bit of chatting with because they have a lot of craft that go over Montana. And I like to call these folks, they're Syrians, but they're not from Syria here on Earth. They are from the Sirius star system. And the world governments call these beings the tall whites or the tall Nordics. They're not really from Norway. Hello, they're from Sirius. But we call them the tall Nordics or the tall whites because they are very, 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 very right. I mean, think back to the 90s. Think back to Spike on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, who had this white blonde hair and he was super, super white. Yeah, it's kind of the tall whites, the ones who want to keep their hair on. A lot of them take their hair off. A lot of them just don't have hair. Just depends. So anyway, this is the race of beings that the United States government, through the military and through some very extensive programs, have been in contact with. And we're not talking just everybody in the Navy or Air Force gets to meet an alien, okay? We're talking these are very, very high levels of clearance that sometimes our Joint Chiefs don't even have access to some of these programs. And they're programs that are run off of taxpayer money, yet they're run through what we like to call dark Pentagon programs. And that's just a really dramatic word for things that they keep secret and keep off the books so people can't get nosing around and figure out what they're doing. And one of the reasons they do keep them off the Pentagon books, yes, it's to make sure that you don't have some president who, in essence, is a temporary employee of the United States of America. That's what any public servant is. We vote them in. They stay in for 2 years or 4 years or whatever their term is. And then either they get voted in again or they don't. So the folks who run these programs are long haulers. There are some folks in these, I guess, secret government programs, if you want to call it that. I just call them highly classified government programs that have been working. Their specialty is working with off-worlders, reversing off-world technology. As of maybe the last 8 years or so, some of the directions of these weird government organizations have gotten kind of dark. And I think that's just a reflection of where we're at in consciousness, to be honest with you. Because you'll look, our world has become a little bit dark, right? And the United States has become just oh my God, don't even start me up on the Mystery Science 3000 episode that is the United States of America the last 4 years. It's been building. It was building during the Obama administration with all the racism. And now it's blown out to utter freaking lunacy. So this is one of the reasons that we're focusing on our off-world friends today instead of the planet of Earth. However, this being seen, this being known, our off-world friends have known for quite some time that we are a bit of a volatile species, and they've been really waiting for the governments to either break it to everybody that, say, the United States has been working with folks from Sirius or the tall whites. They've been waiting forever. And they're trying to give us the benefit of the doubt, but do we actually get up and do what we need to do? No, we do not. So we have podcasts like this. And we have movies that are put together by folks like Dr. Stephen Greer, who is a ufologist, who has put together movies like Non-Disclosure, Sirius, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. And this poor guy's been trying to wrangle it up and get this message out for a long time. So here we are. Why is the United States working with the folks from Sirius? Well, we are the ones who put the most money into defense. And the United States of America, I don't know if you know this or not, but we spend more money on defense in our country than does all capital L, than does all of the other first world countries pooled together. That's right. We spend the most. And probably a good third of that money is completely unaccounted for that goes through these black box Pentagon programs, these backdoor Pentagon, I'll call them backdoor secret Pentagon programs. There's really no name for them because, hey, they don't really exist as far as the Pentagon's concerned. I mean, they're actually on budget manifests, these programs. They're on budget manifests. And as a matter of fact, Dr. Stephen Greer had taken one of these budget manifests to one of the Joint Chiefs who was looking at the Pentagon dollar breakdown. And that's kind of, it's Congress's job to dole that money out, but the Joint Chiefs have a lot to say about where it goes and why. And I believe it was the Admiral of the Navy who had reviewed some of these programs, and they were highly classified. He had no idea what they were. He saw all this money getting sucked out going to these mystery programs. So he picked up the phone and called whomever to verify this, and he was told, "I'm sorry, sir. Yes, I know who you are, but you do not have the clearance to hear about this program." And this is the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This is like the top admiral of the Navy. Like there's no other human in the Navy, in the armed forces, in that branch of the armed forces, that is higher up on the respective food chain. And even that person is not considered classified enough. They're not considered authorized. So when we're dealing with the tall whites and why the folks from Sirius are working with us, we have a long-standing history here on the planet of Earth with the cultures, the off-world cultures from Sirius A. And those long-standing relationships go way back in history, too. I mean, if you go back, let's go back to the Giza pyramids. Who do you think came and helped us build those? It certainly wasn't millions of slaves and 5,000 elephants and some really good CG and a 2003 movie of building the pyramids. It was our off-world friends, our off-world cousins that, worked with humans to do a little sculpting of the stones and whatnot, but they really did run a lot of technology back then that was anti-gravity technology, or what I like to call zero buoyancy technology, and that's how they literally floated the blocks up and floated them right into place and just popped them in there and snugged them in, and that was that, So, when we look at the folks from Sirius AB, what do they look like? That's a big question I get. And, I was just explaining that our government, our world governments, call them the tall whites or the tall Nordics because they look very similar to what we would think a tall Nordic person looks like. Fact of the matter is, they do have an ability to augment their cellular structure just a little bit, and they do look a ton like us, the folks from Sirius. And the reason they look so much like us white people is that we look like them. Okay, they did a whole bunch of donating genetics to all sorts of, human species, human hominins that were wandering about the earth. So we tend to look more like them. And they are the engineers. They're the builders. They're the terraformers. They are the explorers. Those are the folks from Sirius. It's kind of weird. I don't know if you follow the Alien series, movies. Now I'm switching gears on you to the, Ridley Scott, Alien, right? With Sigourney Weaver back in the day. And I don't know if you follow the Alien series, but the very last Alien movie that they put out, that was a precursor to the entire Alien dynasty, okay? It was a prequel, if you will. The opening sequence of that film was eerie. I mean, it was absolutely eerie because it showed a spaceship coming down and this tall white figure, this massive white figure getting out and pouring something, allowing his DNA to be torn apart, and he fell into a river and life on Earth kind of started. And though they were not the gods that started life on Earth, they definitely did affect, quite honestly, how we look. Because there was, like I said, there was a little gene splicing, and what happens on Earth stays on Earth, and on we go. So if you get a chance to see the 2012 Alien prequel film called Prometheus, you gotta rent it. Because I tell you what, that opening sequence freaked me out. I thought, all right, well, clearly I'm not the only person in contact with the folks from Sirius, speaking to them about their histories and getting a chance to look through the ethers, look through the timelines, look through the psychic world to see what's happening. Clearly, I'm not the only one, right? So when I saw this, I about crapped little green apples. I thought, go Hollywood. Wow. So when you watch this, you'll see these very tall, very muscular, similar in how we're built beings. And it's interesting because these beings, of course, they're huge. They're big. They're 12 feet, 18 feet tall. And actually, that's about how tall the folks from Sirius are. Short ones are 12 feet tall. Average size is, 15, 16 feet tall. A tall one is 18 to 20 feet tall. So they got quite a range in how tall they are. Yet the big guys, I mean, they're big. They're big. And we see evidence of this in our Egyptian architecture. I was just talking about the fact that our OffWorld friends helped us build the pyramids and many other structures that are now underneath the water off of the coasts of China, California, Alaska. I mean, off of our coast, because our ocean levels, of course, have, come and gone over the millennia. Yet these beings, if you look in Egypt, the folks who are in the petroglyphs there and the carvings and the paintings, the people who are considered the large and in charge pharaohs, they're huge. They're like these 18-foot figures who are sitting little bitty tiny people on their lap. Okay. Now it's important to note that when the 1800s rolled around and England sent in Egyptologists to look at all these ruins and to try to decipher that culture and all of the meanings of their language. You got to remember that these were white men from, living in the 1800s who were from a culture that created a grandized sense of self anyway. My gosh, the late 1800s into the early 1900s, that was the brag it up, fake it till you make it initiator. I mean, that was insane. So here are these Egyptologists that were mostly male. I think all of them, if not maybe a female here or there. Yet the males came in and evaluated these pictures of great big Egyptians, and they applied them through the lens of that 1800s masculine, know-it-all, cerebral type of being, okay? And they said, oh, well, these beings were just creating themselves as gods and in the records making themselves look like bigger, stronger, faster people. Kind of like that painting of Henry VIII in his later life that is humongous. I mean, it's so humongous. He's standing there in his armor looking strong and oh my God, and it's a huge painting. Well, obviously he wasn't that tall, right? However, the Egyptian culture, again, is different than the ego of white, especially white European culture of that time frame. The Egyptians were a very literal culture, and they didn't have any reason to document within the tombs these beings, these pharaohs, these gods, to be larger than the human beings that were on the earth. They didn't see that as lifting them up in effigy. They just were a literal culture that were producing exactly what they saw. And we also see reference to this in Mayan culture, Incan culture, where you see these incredible giant beings that are operating what look like spaceships with pedals, and there's fire and all of this going on. And when you see them in reference in carvings to other people, they're quite a bit bigger. I mean, they look like they're 20 feet tall compared to these other beings around them that are full-grown people, but they just look tiny. So this was a very important piece in that I'm not so sure that our human egos, especially in the late 1800s, early 1900s, could handle the thought of beings being larger than we are. You know, I tell you, especially at that time frame during the intellectual patriarchal in white westernized European culture. Oh no! Don't be bringing in great big giant aliens that'll make you sit on their lap and make you call them daddy. I mean, that's not gonna fly. So these large beings from Sirius A that are really captured on the walls of crypts inside of well, many different burial chambers. I could cite them all, but lots of them in Egypt, as well as on burial chambers and holy places in Central and South America. After a while, you just kind of have to accept that there are beings that are bigger than we are. And the bottom line is that they are bigger than we are. They come from a much larger world. They have a much higher gravity index. Out by Sirius is a binary star system. It's Sirius AB. Those are the two. Sirius A and Sirius B are the two circulating binary stars that fling around each other at a very high rate of speed. So that's going to create a really big gravitational well out in that neck of the woods. So if you do have a large body or a large planet out there, the beings that are, it'd have to be a really large planet. Otherwise, it's just going to get pulled into everything. And so whatever planet would be out towards that area, it's really, really big. And the beings on it are big, and they can withstand a lot of gravity, which is one of the reasons they find our environment so inviting. It's so easy for them to go ahead and apply. I don't want to call it anti-gravity technology because that's not true. It's technology that creates a harmonic or an electromagnetic, depending on the technology, hull around whatever it is that they're trying to, quote, levitate. And just like the hull of a ship on the ocean, the actual ocean, the density of water is so vast that it will hold up tons and tons and tons of steel in an ocean liner if that steel is displaced in a certain way, okay? So we're talking basic physics here. They just have an idea of what to do with the physics to, again, create a hull that really turns our atmosphere, our electromagnetic system and our atmospheric plane on Earth, okay? That turns into the density of water, so to speak, which this isn't exactly, this is hard to explain. So it's not like actually technically our atmosphere by them is considered as dense as water. I'm just giving you an example, okay? And then they're able to create these hulls that will float against this electromagnetic pressure. So there's a lot going on with our folks from Sirius, and they're documented in our ancient cultures. They even visited if you go down to Australia and you go visit the Aboriginal people, they're down there with the Aboriginal people. And this is a long, 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 long time ago. There are the Aboriginal star mounds that are down in Australia. And look this up. The people from the stars, as the lore goes, came and gave the folks who were indigenous to this world, they gave them star charts. They showed them where they were from. And these ancient peoples built mounds to represent where they were from. Like they literally created a sort of a braille star chart on the ground out of rocks and mounds and whatnot. And these folks, and also some tribes in Africa, were referring in drawings, in star mounds, in verbal stories and histories. They were referring to Sirius A out there floating around in space as a binary star system. Now, gang, we didn't know that it was a binary star system until we had, and we being westernized smarty pants, egotistical society, we didn't know that Sirius was an AB star system. It was a binary star system until the invention of the telescope that could see that far. And even though, really, we had, again, these Central African cultures. We had cultures that were Aboriginal, that for really back to a prehistoric time frame. Even the Hopi tribes talked about the star people coming and talking to them about where they were from. And again, we're talking old, 10,000 years ago old, okay? It wasn't until, are you ready for this? I love this. It wasn't until 1862 that we had a telescope that we could actually see both of the stars. Sirius, if you're wondering where Sirius is, you're listening to me talk about Sirius. You're like, well, it's Sirius XM. It's on my dial. What are you talking about? Sirius is the dog star, and it's the brightest star in Earth's night sky, okay? It's the one that you're thinking, wow, is that the space station? Is it a UFO? It's really, really bright up there. And it's, the fact that Sirius is such a central part of Earth culture. Don't you kind of wonder, why? Yes. We love as ancient peoples to look up and ruminate on the night sky and look at all of these pretty bright stars and make up stories about them and whatnot. But when you have cultures, 3 cultures, ancient cultures, prehistoric, really, cultures that are all over the world, the southwestern part of the United States, Central Africa, the Southern Hemisphere, and the middle of God, Australia, where it gets to be 120, 130 degrees out there. These Aboriginal folks, everybody sharing the same story of the star people visitors who came from the same, they're all pointing to the same star, Sirius, the dog star. In Greek, actually, Sirius means glowing. It doesn't mean dog. But it's huge. It looks massive. Because really there's only a few planets that outshine Sirius. The moon, obviously. Then the moon's not a planet. And I shouldn't even say that. There's a few celestial bodies, I'm going to correct myself, that outshine Sirius. The moon is one of them. The International Space Station is another one of them. Sirius is freaking bright. It's nuts. So what's so weird is that in 1862, they discovered Sirius B with this telescope. And Sirius B is like 10,000 times dimmer than Sirius A, okay? And so it's really hard to see from Earth. And you can't really tell it's there unless you've got, aliens saying, hey, we're from this system over there, and there's 2 stars there. And the gravity well created by those 2 stars dinging around one another makes it easy for us to jump through the subsequent stargate or vortex created out in that point of space and pop in right through the middle of your sun. And that's where they come in. They come in right through the middle of the sun. But I'll get to that in a minute. Our sun in our galaxy. Yes, that's a thing. But I'll get there in a second. So basically, you've got this Sirius B, okay? And it's 10,000 times dimmer. And it's so dim, actually. It wasn't until 2005, gang, that astronomers could even get a good estimation on the mass of 2005 of Sirius B, because and it was the Hubble telescope that was able to measure the mass of Sirius B. So that tells you that these ancient cultures are not just making a bunch of stuff up when obviously they're around the world sharing the exact same information coming from the star people. All right. And I was talking earlier, just a few minutes ago, about the fact that serious folks, they're very serious. But I'm here till Friday. Tip your servers. The beings from Sirius AB are really familiar with Earth. I mean, they've been coming here for millions of years. They've been using us as a jump point or passing us on their way to other places because the way that, and this is how it's been explained to me by the folks from the Sirius star system. And sometimes they feel chatty and sometimes they're not as chatty. They can be kind of down to businessy. They're not the most squishy, huggy, lovey folks. They're not really like the folks from Uturan, which are a completely different species, and we'll talk about them. Or really genus. Species is so rude and racist and weird. I got to stop saying that. So if we back up here, the Oturan are much more lovey, squishy, gushy, whatever. The folks from Sirius are kind of in their own way, but they're a little more utilitarian in their culture. Just kind of a little more reserved. I want you to think of, Sparta versus Athens. They're not a warring race at all, but they're just more heady. They're more intellectualized. So when I was talking to them about why the heck they came through the center of the sun, like for us, okay, we're so rudimentary, you guys. You got to understand, folks. We are so behind the times when it comes to not only the physics of understanding how to jump through wormholes from one point in space to the next, but also having the craft that will withstand that, as well as the physical bodies. Gang, the thing that we don't like to talk about as humans is that we are heavily Bluetoothed to this planet. Our brain is clocked onto a frequency emission that comes from the core of the Earth. It comes from the energy of the Earth, or the pulse of the Earth. That is at 7.83 hertz, and some people say it's at 7.82, and that's called the Schumann resonance, all right? And our whole entire body has evolved being Bluetoothed and dependent on this planet for a certain amount of our brain chemistry, as well as our electromagnetic organ function. Okay, so I want you to hear that. We are really terrestrially bound here. It doesn't mean we can't travel through space. We just haven't figured out quite yet how to create not only a gravity-based system that's going to work for us, but a system that's going to keep our brainwave activity a little healthier over time. Because once we get off Earth, our brain starts looking for something to attenuate to, or something to clock to, or something to match up with, all right? And it's looking for that pulse of the Earth, which again is 7.83 hertz. So it's looking for that Schumann resonance. And when we're in space for a long time, we see all kinds of not only mental health, well, I guess if you floated around there by yourself long enough, you go a little cray. However, we don't as much see mental health issues in space as we see physical issues. And we see all kinds of weird chromosome issues, and the telomeres on our chromosomes extend. Because they're not being worn off by gravity. The telomeres on our chromosomes, game, that's what determines when we're going to die. You're going to live and live and live and live until those telomeres wear right off to a nubbin, right to the ends of your chromosomes, and boom. That is the sign to the body that it's time to give up the ghost and go to the next fabulous phase of your life, where you too will be treated to an all-you-can-eat and drink escapade on the party barge for as long as you care to stay. So really, I mean, we literally have this humongous attachment to the planet Earth, and we don't even realize how important Earth is to us, okay? So why don't we jump through wormholes? Well, because our body would have one hell of a time with it. In order to go through a gravity index, a wormhole, you got to have a pretty stabilized system. And you have to understand that the folks from the Sirius AB star system have been galactic explorers, not for hundreds of years, not for thousands of years, not for tens of thousands, not for hundreds of thousands, but for millions of years. This is an extremely evolved, extremely old society. And so their bodies have gotten used to not only a higher gravitational index with this big planet they live on, yet they've also gotten used to the fact that they've been doing a lot of dimensional jumping and dimensional travel. That was a really big part of their exploration as a race. And I've talked to these folks from Sirius on and off, the ones that will talk to me. I'm a little chatty for them. They're kind of like, oh my God, it's that one girl. Oh. Did you guys ever, okay, I'm interrupting myself. Did you ever used to watch, I believe it was the Second City Players back in the 90s. It might have been Mad TV, but I want to say it came from Canada. And there was this weird character, and it was this weird this guy, obviously a comic, was playing this little boy who was just awkwardly weird. And he kept trying to make friends with people, but he was super weird. And he'd show up to people's house and be like, hi, can I be your friend? And the person would be like, well, I'm kind of busy right now. And the kid would be like, can I have an onion? And they'd be like, you what? Can I have an onion? And they'd hand the kid an onion and he'd eat it like an apple. I don't remember if you remember this character. But anyway, it was super weird. And that's how I feel like the Sirius folks look at me sometimes, as the onion kid. Can I have an onion? Like, can I talk to you about your craft? They're like, oh God, yes, sure. Just shut up after this. I mean, they're not mean. I just think that I ask them rudimentary questions, and a few of them really genuinely like me, but they, humans are just kind of a passerby thing for them. They don't dislike us. They're okay. We're okay. They've got other stuff going on, right? So one of the fascinating things that I've learned is that when I talk to them about their physiology, they had, like, we have seafaring cultures, the Polynesian cultures that climbed aboard magnificent seafaring vessels and went all the way out to Easter Island in the middle of nowhere, and then went all the way out from Polynesia all the way out there to Hawaii. We think about that on our planet, yet for the spacefaring beings, the folks from Sirius AB were very much like the seafaring Polynesian explorers, except for they are spacefaring. And just like any culture that is exploring, not everybody lives through that. Not everybody's bodies could handle dimensional travel, could handle vortexes and wormholes and that type of augmentation. And also their technology is a lot better in shielding their folks from, they were trying to explain the physics to me of what happens to a human body when it goes through time distortion. And the best I could kind of pull apart from what they were talking about is if I tried to go through a wormhole or you tried to go through a wormhole and we didn't have proper shielding on the craft, okay? And this is what they explained to me. I want to take away the option of being smashed by a black hole because, well, duh, all right? But we're considering that we have these craft and we've made them fly through wormholes and stargates and compressed space folds. And actually, a lot of the stargates are not black holes. They are folds in space that create a ripple or a rip, like two black curtains hanging right together, and you can kind of scoot between them, and it looks like you're disappearing if you're looking from the stage at the front, yet actually you're just slipping between two curtains, okay? And the black curtains are dimensional. So they were expressing to me that we do have a challenge with our physical bodies, trying to go through this dimensional travel because we have so much water in our body and our bones are very porous. The Sirius AB folks, we share a lot of genes with them, especially if you're white. If you're white, you share a ton of genes with these off-worlders. And the difficult part, though, is that they have a different body density. We have a lot of saline in our body. We're from a water planet. Life on our planet crawled out of the oceans initially and lived in the water. So we have a big, big, big portal of water, 70% of our body that we walk around with. Well, when you're in space, water is as we talked before, it's a very dense, heavy. It's heavy. Particle-wise, it's heavy. I mean, even when water is let go in a space capsule with no gravity, it forms into little bubbles all over the place. It doesn't just disintegrate into particles. It clombs together. So because water has a skin on it. And this goes on. But the water capacity, apparently, when you're pulling through space-time, that wants to dehydrate. It wants to we would literally be dehydrated like a piece of beef jerky. And the other thing is you're kind of stretched from point A to point B. So if you don't, I want you to think of the Star Trek. This is the best analogy ever for anybody who watches Star Trek. The way that these folks from Sirius have explained this to me is because of the space fold, okay? I want you to think of looking at a stage, and the stage curtains are closed and there's a spotlight on the stage, and the stage curtains are black. And an actor walks out on the stage and slips between the two curtains, as I was saying before. The actor looks like he or she disappears going between the curtains. However, at one point, one foot is going to be out where we, the audience, can see that actor, and the other foot is going to be crossing into the backstage area that we can't see anymore. So what I'm trying to explain is that in this dimensional travel, according to the folks from Sirius, one of the things that's tough for our technology to get over is that we have one part of our physical body in one section of space, then we're moving through a fold, and all of a sudden the other part of that body or craft or whatever is in the other part of space. And obviously there is some distance or some space between that, yet you're slipping through space-time to go through this doorway. And even though it's a very minute little step, when you're looking at the way that dimensional physics works, the physics of it are still that you've got 1 foot, 200 million light years or whatever it is, from your other foot. You've got one section of your craft, 200 million light years from the back section, from the front section. And then it happens in a nanosecond, and then they're kind of reunited. But I want you to think, it's fabulous. I want you to think about the Star Trek graphics, like Star Trek Next Generation, Discovery, whatever. Well, Discovery is different because now they have a completely different spore drive, and that's different. But the warp drives, when they actually go forward, you see the ship kind of get long and then the back of the ship catches up with it. That is somewhat what we're talking about here. So when the folks from Sirius A, B are talking to me about why we don't just get on a spaceship and why we don't just truck through the sun and go somewhere else, it's because our physiology will just rip apart. And the water in our body is so dense. It's like, what? What are you doing? You want me to be two places at one time? So the Sirians have evolved over time to be able to travel through wormholes. And the ones whose physiology couldn't make it, pretty much just as far as they could tell me, they just either ripped in half or half of them disappeared or they disappeared entirely. Their bodies couldn't keep up with the travel. But also they have evolution weeded out the ones who couldn't space travel, which is sad and weird, but true. And the other portion of that is that they also have technologies that can account for creating dimensional shifts that move across, think of a force field that moves in nanoseconds with space-time shifting so that the body is coalesced, in addition to the fact that they just evolved, not dying, just like the folks who came across, the folks who succeeded in going all the way from French Polynesia, which was just Polynesia back then, all the way around the world to get up to Easter Island or Hawaii. They were the ones who lived. There were many others who didn't live for whatever reason. Maybe they couldn't take no fresh water for that long, or maybe the elements got them. But the ones that lived were the successful travelers, right? So they were explaining all this to me and telling me that they had literally hundreds of thousands, millions of years of travel, and that they've just evolved this way. And so here we are putt-putting around the world in our space station. And here's Elon Musk wanting to go to a Mars in a combustion machine. I mean, wanting to combust something in order to push us through space. I mean, we're still going through space real time. We're not even, if we were the internet, okay, if the galactic races were the internet and we're the internet, we're not even dial-up, okay? We're not even a telegraph, okay? We are the cavemen taking sticks and whacking them against trees to send some sort of sound through the forest. We're the apes. We're the Bigfoot, picking up sticks and whacking them. It's called tree knocking to communicate through the forest. That's what we are galactically when we are talking any sort of space travel or space understanding. And our off-world cousins, they know this overall. And we've been trying to reverse engineer their technology. We're trying to this, we're trying to that. But here is I'm going to pause the sun coming through the middle of the sun thing for just a second, because here's the biggest complaint that I get from the folks from the Sirius AB system is that we just flat don't listen to them. We don't listen to them. They try to tell us, hey, guess what? Physiologically, you're not going to make it through this kind of space travel. And we're like, yes, we will. You can't tell us what to do. Especially we in the United States, we're horrible. We're America. And there are some really great scientists that are working and this with this incredible technology with the Sirius AB folks trying to figure out how the heck we can get through those doorways, how to create the same sort of shifting phase bubble that protects us so we don't rip apart in space. I mean, there's all kinds of things that they're trying to do, yet the Sirius AB folks are like, look, you guys, our technology isn't going to work for you. You're going to need other technology. You're going to need to talk to the Oturan. You're going to need technology that is not just tech. You are a very heavily energetically advanced species, but you don't think you are. And you have the opportunity to advance your molecules and to advance your DNA and to resonate in a different way that would allow you to be able to travel through these gravity wells or whatever they are. However, if you think you're going to wrap yourself in a force field and some really nice alloys that are super fancy, you're not going to make it. So their biggest frustration with us is that our government has been very slow in understanding the metaphysical aspect of our physiology in terms of space travel. Now, for the folks who go to, and that gets us to the Oturan, who they are heavily telepathic. Their craft are biometric. They work with their biology. That's a whole different podcast, and we'll get to that on a different podcast. However, they're the ones we need to be talking to because they would be able to help us with, well, what do we do with a slower body that's got a water density that is going to react differently to having one foot in one dimension and another foot in another? How is that going to happen? What's going to happen there? So what's fascinating here is that when the folks from Sirius travel to our galaxy, one of the reasons they come through the Milky Way is because our sun, our hydrogen ball, in the center of suns, we think of them as like this roiling core of boiling hot, whatever. We don't actually know what's at the center of the sun. We make all sorts of guesses. Yet there is so much energy there, okay? I want you to look at it like a 110 plug-in in your wall. There is so much energy coming out of the center of the sun that it literally pokes a hole in space-time. And if you know how to go through that, and you already have a type of technology that shields you from dimensional ripping or rifts or whatever, a little bit of heat probably isn't going to bother you, okay? So they come through the center of our sun because the sun has, in essence, and so do all very large stars, they all kind of poke a hole in space to a degree. That's why when they collapse on themselves, they become black holes, and they are holes in space, and you just see the hole instead of the glowing gas around them. And it's not that they're operating on the same premise. And again, these Sirius folks, they really are kind, and they have explained so much stuff to me, and they really are kind. And I'll feel them traveling overhead. They have circular round craft. So does some of the Oturan folks, for that matter, too. But they'll be traveling in that way, and I'll feel them. And sometimes they have a lot of beings in them. Sometimes they have 2 or 4 or 20. And I'll just start, if you want to use the word telepathically, just energetically speaking to them. They pick up on that frequency. And sometimes they talk, and sometimes they just phase out. They just disappear. My wife gets really frustrated. She's like, will you stop talking to the aliens? I want to watch the spaceship for a while. And you'll just watch them phase out. They just decide they don't want to talk, and they go to a slightly different space in the sky and just hop over somewhere else. Yet they've explained to me that one of the reasons that they come through our sun is because not only is it a great jump point because of this gravity well or this energy plug-in that's created there, but also because of the orbit of our planets. Apparently, all the planets pull on the sun, and the planets are moving outward. They're moving, the universe is expanding at insane rates. It's just like the universe itself, where we live, our little galaxy, whatever, is floating in this big vacuum. And the vacuum is constantly eating the outsides of what is not a vacuum. So the vacuum is eating a non-vacuum, and it's pulling it into the vacuum. I want you to think of a black hole sucking anything into it that it can suck in. Who knows? We might all be living in one giant black hole. Who knows? We don't know. And maybe the black hole pokes its way out of the hole into whatever's on the other side of that. However, that being said, so the universe is expanding, right? And so the sun, when these beings use the sun to come through as a stabilizing jump point from whatever dimensional rip is created, again, by the stars Sirius A and Sirius B, which are flinging around each other. Okay, binary stars are trapped in an orbit with one another, and they just wing-ding around each other very quickly. And they just play tag and go around and around and around and around. Well, you have that much mass. And as we've discussed, they've explained to me that in the center of these stars, there is this portal, okay? And you take that much mass that's spinning around each other, you create a gravity well with two big portals on it. I mean, that's a massive Stargate is what you're dealing with there. It's massive. It's massive. And not only is it massive, it's powerful. You know, Sirius A is the bigger star, okay? And Sirius B is the smaller star. So Sirius B is about the size of the Earth, but it's way more dense than the Earth. So that creates a lot of power. And Sirius B is rotating around Sirius A, and it takes about 50 years for Sirius B to rotate around Sirius A. But Sirius A is huge. It's about twice as massive as our sun. So the fact that it's taken, 50 years and they're kind of wing-dinging around one another, it's quite intense. It's a really, really intense system. And the Sirius system is actually one of our nearest neighbors here to Earth. And are you ready for this? It's really close at 8.6 light years, okay? That means if you traveled the speed of light, and that's what, 186,000 miles per second, right? You'd have to travel at that velocity for 8.6 years to reach that star system if you were going to go putt through space the way that we travel. Obviously, these beings don't travel like that. They don't do it. The Sirius system is also, it's important to note that we think, and we're just speculating on this, but we think that the Sirius system is between maybe 200 and 300 million years old. And that makes a lot of sense because their culture out there, that's these space travelers, are a million or a couple millions of years old. So they've been out there a while. They know what they're doing when they jump through these stars. And Sirius, we're just obsessed with Sirius as a human culture. And I think that's weird because yes, it's closest, and yes, it's brightest, and yes, we've found this binary system and it's interesting, but there's a lot of things out there that are interesting. Why focus on this one star? Well, I believe we focus on this one star because intrinsically within our DNA, we know that our planet has been heavily seeded genetically as well as other ways with technologies and all kinds of things by the spacefarers that came from this area. I mean, you just know a thing or two about a thing or two in your own genes, in your own blood. It's really quite something. In Sirius A, it's hauling butt. Not only is Sirius B is rotating around it, but Sirius A is spinning as well. Okay, and it's really spinning hardcore. I mean, it's many times the mass of the sun, and it's humongous, right? And it takes about 2 of our days to turn, which is a big deal because it's so big. So anyway, I'm giving you all these physics because we're talking about opening massive stargates in space. So here's our little sun, which really does not have that same mass or density. But the reason that they can go from Sirius to us is because all of the gravitational pull of all the planets that are all spinning around the sun help create the sun, and inside of the sun, it helps create a really big gate. So if you want to see craft from the Sirius system coming in and out of our Milky Way galaxy, one of the ways that you can see that, the really, 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 really big ones come through the center of the sun. Smaller craft will come through vortex points here on the Earth because they can leverage that, if you want to call it a stargate or that vortex point or those particular black curtains in space, they can leverage one against the other using the Earth's electromagnetic forces too, and all these vortex points. And I mean, it's really cool. It's like this whole, like a flight path for craft that work a lot differently than ours do. So here are these beings that are here. And the American government is primarily working with them because, again, we spend the most money on technology. Now, the Chinese are catching up to us, but they spend money on technology. They don't spend secret money on defense in the same way that we do. And really, I think that they deal mostly with the Oturan folks. And when they do deal with the off-worlders, a lot of times there are certain world governments that don't want to deal with them. They kind of wig them out just a little bit. And the Oturan folk are dealing with craft that are, again, they're biometric, and that's another podcast. But what I'm talking about here today are the folks from Sirius. And we work with them attempting to even bring in green energy. We're attempting to do all sorts of things, and they would bring us more technology, yet our government says, no, thank you, we're good. Now, if you think about the Star Trek series, you have off-world rules. If you are part of Starfleet and you're visiting a different world, it's called the Prime Directive, and it means that you're not to interfere with the technologies of the beings that you come upon if they've never been to space, okay, if they're non-warp species. So I'm such a Trekkie. It's so bad. Oh, it's so embarrassing. My wife is like, really with you? But I am, because I talk to these beings all the time. And they talk to me about how to build these cool deep space engines. And oh, it's so cool. So anyway, our Sirius Pals gang, they are very well-meaning. And one of the things that they're here to do is to not only try to get us out of the dark ages with energy, although we just won't take them up on it because we in the United States would lose tons of money if we didn't operate off of fossil fuel templates. We would lose all our stocks and all the things we think are important. And here are the folks from Sirius going, seriously, we can help you with all of your power issues. Yet we are tapping them for defense. Now, the folks from Sirius aren't stupid, and they know that we can only take some of this information so far, and they really aren't here to advise us on defensive issues. And in fact, when we've tried to reverse engineer some of their technology to make it a defensive issue, they've taken it away. They've just deconstructed it on a cellular level and took it away. Because not only can we not really consciously or responsibly produce energy to the point that they are extracting it from dark matter. We could if we'd listen to them, but we don't like to do that. The other thing is that we are interested only in dominion at this point with a lot of their technologies, and that's not really going to work, and we do have some weirdo megalomaniac humans on this earth that are super sociopathic. And what they want to do is they want to take people and have certain people live and have certain people perish because they believe that we're overpopulated. These hoity-toity types believe that there are expendable packing popcorn people who don't need to go into the new era. And so that would be folks who are lower income, folks they deem as less intelligent. I mean, there are groups of people out there that are really creepy in terms of evaluating the amount of resources on the planet and who gets to have those resources. Some folks call them the deep state or the Illuminati or the dark forces or whatever. This is more just global financial networks and some folks who, not Bill Gates, not the people you think, these are people you've never heard of that have concerns over overpopulation and what's going to happen and trying to survive that. So some of those folks are trying to develop green energies. And I say green, it's more astrophysical energies that we can use on the planet, but not while everybody's here. It would be something in the nirvana time frame for only those that made it through a big catastrophe or a food shortage or whatever. I mean, it's stupid. It's really stupid. So the folks from Sirius AB have kind of stepped back a little bit in a lot of their dealings with the United States. They have scientists here that they absolutely love. They have people here that they absolutely love. We as a culture, they think we're really cool, that we're kind of like their weird little brothers that are trying to figure out how to ride a tricycle as they go zipping through in their Ferrari, So they have some compassion for us. One of the things that they love to do is bring us in to a more effective power distribution system. And our government does have this technology gang. They know how to suck energy like Tesla. Nikola Tesla knew how to do that, how to suck energy out of the air and make it free to everybody. And when Nikola Tesla died, they seized his papers and his patents, and they seized everything, and they shut it down because it would be free energy for everyone. So the United States, not even as much the government, is as much of the sociopathic consumerist system that runs the portions of the government. They're the ones who really went after the patents. And I make that distinction, gang, because I think it's really important as we go into this new world to not demonize government. It's really the old world systems that were the bummer. And there are all kinds of really good people across all party aisles who want to be public servants, who want to get in there and really stabilize this nation. So I don't want you to think that it's any president of the United States who's able to walk right in and look at all this technology and just decide we don't get it. The president's not even being told about this stuff that the folks from Sirius have brought to us. That they're not at all. And whenever people try to bring this information forward, it gets suppressed. The patents get locked down if they won't sell the patents. It's all kinds of weird stuff. There's been amazing energy devices that have been uploaded for free. Make it yourself for free on the internet, and it disappears. So, this is a restricted system based upon, it's based upon commerce. It's based upon commerce. So when we're talking about the folks from Sirius A, we're talking about folks who really want to come and help us out. And one of the reasons they picked the United States again is our defense budget, but it's also in that they saw that we would throw a lot of resources towards exploration. And they've been a little bit disheartened over the last, since the moon landing, they've been a little disheartened that we don't have that much interest in going to different planes or places. We do on a scientific level, but it's only to save the few, or we just can't help as human beings just taking a poop on the best ideas possible. So they haven't, really given us everything because we still haven't demonstrated that we have a consciousness that's working for all people. We're still trying to cover the butt of a few of the people, and that doesn't really work very well. So in all of this, what we've got is a set of off-world cousins who are raring to really help us make a difference. Now, we as human beings can circumvent these secret backdoor government groups. We can circumvent this acquisition of technology that's being withheld from all of us by talking to these beings ourselves. And like I said, I'm kind of joking about myself. I'm kind of being self-effacing about them thinking I'm the onion kid. They really don't think that I'm quite that annoying. And they're willing to answer my questions. Sometimes they're just busy and they can't pick up the phone, so to speak. Yet if you want to talk to the folks from Sirius, I recommend that you download the CE5, Close Encounters 5, CE5 app that teaches all about group meditation and how to connect with these guys on a temporal or psychic level. There's some of us who were just born onto this planet who had a much, for whatever reason, much greater understanding of the psychic mechanics or physics of psychic mechanics than maybe some other folks out the gate. Yet we are all capable of this. Okay, I might have been born with an operating system that said, hey, let's pick up everything and decode everything and talk to everybody on every dimensional level. And I don't always want to talk to everybody on every dimensional level, but hey, you're born how you're born. So that's not to say that you can't do it if you don't feel like you have the same type of aptitude or the same level of aptitude or whatever. Gang, we are an interconnected Bluetoothed species, all right? And in this podcast, what I'm trying to convey to you is the mechanics of how these folks get here, who they are, how they've been here before, what they're trying to help us out with. And the folks from Sirius would love to download us with ingenious ideas of how to make, clean power and how to clean our water and how to survive down here without a currency system. I mean, it's not like they have money on Sirius. Come on. You're not a spacefaring group who's been around for millions of years still trying to figure out a currency system. They're so far ahead of that. That's not their purpose for being here. Accruing money and wealth to survive is so not at all where they're at. So we being a Bluetooth species, gang, if you download the CE5 app, then you're going to have the opportunity to learn to make these meditative groups, and you can call in these UFOs. It's awesome. And a lot of times you'll get the Oturan who will respond to that, but a lot of the folks from Sirius will as well. What they want to see us do is they want to see us evolve. They want to see us evolve as a species, as a nation, as a world. They want to see us become more well, they'd love to introduce us into the galactic family, and so would many of these other species. Yet we drag our heels. We're too busy making money down here. We will not get out of this 1800s conquest mentality. And that's one of the reasons, gang, that I'm always harping on this podcast about how we need to come out of this old world fighting modality. Democrats are not your evil thing. Republicans aren't your evil thing. We are human, and our human hearts and our human minds and our human ability to hook together is what's going to show these beings that we're ready to have their help outside of governmental system. Right now, because they operate under their own version of a prime directive, right now they're not getting involved in a lot of our stuff because they just don't want to. A, we're kind of small potatoes in the evolutionary cycle, so they've got other things they're dealing with. But also B, we wouldn't be ready for the kind of help they're ready to give us if we think they're demons, or we think they're trying to take us over, or we labor under these false flag ideas that have been placed into our consciousness since the 1940s and 50s, since we've really been interfacing with our off-world friends, that they're going to come and kill us. Let's not forget about that narrative. Oh, the aliens are going to come and kill you. Don't forget about that, which is horse crap. No aliens are going to come kill us. That's stupid. They don't want to come kill us. So, there's a whole series here of ways they want to communicate with us telepathically. So download that CE5. Ask them all kinds of questions. They'll talk to you. And, they're a little dry. They're a little emotionless by our standards. I'm sure they think they're wildly fabulous and passionate. They look at us to be heavily chemically driven creatures. We do have their DNA within us. Yet we're a little more instinctual. We're a little more empathic. We're a little earlier on in the evolutionary chain, even though this is the third iteration of human beings down here. We've been rebooted, almost wiped out and rebooted. This is the third time we've come around. And I get to learn all this cool stuff from these angels and from these beings and from these off-worlders. And we've got some land, my wife and I, that's outside of Billings. And it's in an area in the back of the Beartooth Mountains where you just don't see a lot of light. There's not a lot of light pollution out there. There's nothing out there. And so, man, can you see UFOs just crossing overhead. And so I'm just kind of wrapping up this section of what the folks from Sirius are here to do, why they're here, what they're here doing, and how much they want to help us with our technologies, with how to identify their craft. So sometimes it's kind of tricky because a lot of the Oturan craft can look a lot like the craft from Sirius. Yet the craft from Sirius tend to be just these. They can be perfectly round orbs, or they're massive, massive, huge ships like the size of our moon. They're giant, and we don't generally see those. Yet in the sky, Elon Musk, of course, has this goal of 41,000 satellites by 2021 or something insane, and all the satellites that he's launching up there are now wrecking astronomical pictures because they have these weird streaks across them. It's really causing problems. We're going to have to literally launch, cameras, outside of our atmosphere now to be able to take pictures of space because we've littered so heavily with terrible light and streak pollution from all our satellites. Anyway, when you're looking up in the sky, a satellite oftentimes is pretty faint. It's not moving all that fast, and it's going in a perfectly straight line. The brighter the object, it could be a low-flying satellite. However, look for something that really does in its shape look like a star. It looks round. And it's hauling butt because it's in the high up, it's in the lower atmosphere, but it's way, way up there, and it's moving. And you're not going to see it at an hour or two or three later in the exact same spot. That's a satellite. Oftentimes, if it's a UFO, it's going to be going in a line, but you watch if it veers a little to the right or it veers a little to the left, or it makes a hard right turn. Those are not satellites. Satellites, once they're launched and they're going in a straight line. So anything that completely disappears that you're looking at up there, that's an off-world craft. Anything that's going along and then divides into two different things, that's an off-world craft. That's a classic Sirius A/B thing. They're bringing through more than one ship in a particular place. It's just very interesting about our neighbors from Sirius A/B. And, just like humans, some are cool and some aren't as cool. Most of the ones I'm talking to are cool. And if you want to know more about this, this is fascinating to me. Canada's former Minister of National Defense came out my gosh, he's been talking about it for years and years and years. But basically, in 2013, was at a hearing in Washington, D.C., a citizen hearing on ET disclosure. And he got up there and he talked about how aliens are living among us, which they are. And it's likely that two of them are working with the U.S. government. And what's crazy about that, gang, is that I've seen, if you want to say psychically, for years and years, that there are a group of about 8 people who really run the world's commerce and run the world governments and whatnot. And 2 of them were Inhumans. They were aliens. And so this gentleman's name is Paul Hellyer, and his last name is spelled Hellyer. And you can Google Paul Hellyer about all of this information that he's brought forward. And he talks about how these tall whites walk among us, and sometimes they're harder to identify. And some of them, like I said, some of them are smaller, and some of them can really move their particle matter to just not be quite as big and massive and whatnot. And the ones who've been down here and the ones who come here are the ones who are smaller and blend in a little better, even at 6'8" or 9, So Paul Hellyer's written a number of books, and you can find him online. Just Google Paul Hellyer, Canadian Defense Minister, and all of this stuff comes up. And you can learn about all kinds of different aliens that came from different places. Yet it's important to note that the Sirius folks, they talk about coming from all of these different places. And that is where they don't literally come from the star Sirius. They come from different systems that are outside by Sirius. And there are many, just like there are many humans that are of different ethnicities, there are different folks from the Sirius A/B star system that are different ethnicities from that core strain of being. And so just look it up. And yes, we do have some kind of creepy ET folks who come in here to do odd things, but not as much anymore because we are advancing as a species, and that really leaves less wiggle room for them to interfere. Most of everybody who's coming here who are off-worlders, especially the folks from Sirius, they've been coming here for thousands and millions of years, are here to help us transition at some point. And even the 2 of them that work with the America and work with the world, they're kind of here to make sure we don't go crazy with the box of matches and light us all on fire. And an example of them making sure that we don't do that, if you Google missile launches from Air Force bases that have had mysterious craft come in and literally disarm the warhead, and the warhead falls to the earth while the rest of the rocket is shooting upwards. Malmstrom Air Force Base here in Montana is famous for occurrences of UFOs coming up, especially during the missile crisis time in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s. And when we were trying to launch missile tests out here, these orbs would come in and basically with what looked like laser beams be circling the rocket that's moving at roughly 5,000 miles an hour. There would be this orb moving all the way around it as this rocket was moving along, shooting it with a little beam until it basically sawed off the warhead, and the warhead fell to earth and didn't explode, and the rocket just kept going. So they're kind of letting us know that, hey, we can kind of just not allow you to blow everything up, because they use this planet too. And we don't know what we're doing with our nuclear technologies. We have only scratched the surface of our nuclear technologies. And that big explosion that we had in Hiroshima and Nagasaki affected multi-dimensional cultures. And that's one of the reasons they came a-running. All these ETs came in a-running going, what the hell? Who gave the monkeys a box of matches and a can of gasoline? What is going on? So there's so much in terms of why they're here and what they're doing. Yet the biggest homework I can give you is to download that CE5 app. And you can begin to speak to these off-worlders yourself and get these inspirations that you won't even know where they came from about green energies and all kinds of fascinating technologies, gang. So just wanted to talk to you today about the Sirius A folks, their history with the world, what they're here to help us with, what they refuse to give us because we're still a little too angry and sociopathic in certain ways, and what they want to make sure that we don't do because we live in a big world, gang. And when you want to get your nose too stuck to your phone and the news and what's going on here, of course, be aware, of course, be a citizen of the planet. Don't float off in some unicorn haze. However, recognize that we've got a lot of help to succeed in the universe. And some of this help is coming from our off-world cousins who have been helping us for millennia. So there's a lot of different ETs out there. I'll cover the Oturan and the Zeta Reticuli and all these different ones on different podcasts. But anyway, for now, go look up in the night sky, see if you can identify any of these craft, download the CE5 app, learn to communicate with these folks yourself. And you too can have massive conversations with the folks from Sirius A, and you can be the new kid who wants an onion. Okay, gang. Love to you all. I will see you next podcast.